is such an empowering experience. And it can really, if you can give yourself to that, it can really transform you. It can empower you. It can change you so that you come out the other side and you truly are another person. Like it's almost like even if you go on a really like intense hike, if you will, and you're with a small pot of people and you go through this journey together through the trials and tribulations, you come out the other side and something has shifted, something has changed. It takes you to your limit and then some. And this is not just for birth. I mean, I think of birth as really a metaphor for life.
Hi, I'm Lauren Parsons.
And I'm Andy Jackson, and this is the All Well Co podcast.
Dive deep with us as leading experts share their unique perspectives on topics such as recovery, sleep, movement, and the latest innovations in the space.
Welcome to the All Well Co podcast, Chantal. It's so exciting to have you on here. I know we've known each other for many, many years, but just to set the stage, can you just share how we first met, what drew you to the All Well Co community, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a real honor to be here. Yes, I'm super excited to be here. So thank you. And I was thinking about it. We met way back, I think it was 2019, maybe 2018. I was invited to be a guest speaker at the Barefoot Summit. I think it was the 5th annual Barefoot Summit. And the hosts had invited us to wear the shoes when we were presenting, the Viva Bear shoes. And they put us in touch with you, Andy, I think about sizing. And we just kind of connected and then stayed in touch. And I loved those shoes so much. It's the first time I ever wore them. And then I became ambassador for Viva Bear. And I wear them when I teach my workshops. I wear them when I attend births. I wear them when I work out. So it was just a wonderful kind of collaboration. And it all came through the Barefoot Summit.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you love Viva Barefoot. That is awesome. So, you know what? Just tell people about yourself. What do you do?
Yeah. Okay. So I have been a birth doula since 2003 and consistently assisting births here in the New York metro area. And in recent years, I expanded my practice to take care of women going through perimenopause and menopause. So I was kind of like staying with my clients. It was a pretty much an authentic, organic process. As I moved out of the childbearing years, I became much more interested. I went through perimenopause, got like, why aren't people talking about perimenopause? And started getting more and more into perimenopause. And I also knew that, over 20 years, 23, 24 years as a doula, like I still attend births, but very few births. I knew that like for my own longevity, I needed to kind of transition myself into something that was more sustainable. And I became a board certified health and wellness coach. And I specialize in menopause and women's health and also in brain health coaching. And, so I spend a lot of my time doing that. And then I teach workshops. So through my life as a birth doula and actually a few years into my practice.
Chantal, I want to just stop you there for a second. So for those people who don't understand what the word doula means, what is a doula?
Yes, good question. A doula really means generally a woman, but somebody supporting the birthing person going through labor. So it's the support person that's supporting them educationally, physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, physically through the birth process. So it's not a clinical position, like we don't catch the babies. We're not, generally, we're not, planning on catching the babies, but we're helping them through pregnancy and into postpartum. So helping them through that vulnerable transition, almost like a Sherpa. Like if you were going to go hike Kilimanjaro, you would hire a Sherpa.
So I watched that TV show, The Pit. And on The Pit, I saw there was a lady there who was a doula who was helping somebody at the end of life. So a doula can have different roles. Is that correct?
Yes. It's really a Greek word, similar to Montreuil. So it kind of came up around birth, but now it's used in many ways. And I call myself a menopause doula because I'm helping women through emotional, big transitions, vulnerable transitions. And
such a lovely word as well, just to say that it's a doula. It's kind of soft but strong at the same time. So you spent years as a doula supporting women through one of the most intense experiences of their lives.
Hmm.
So, what does that environment teach you about the human body? And what is something about childbirth that completely changed how you think about stress or resilience?
Yeah, it is, one of the most profound experiences of a woman's life. And with that comes a lot of, fear of the pain, fear of tearing, anxiety of the labor, kind of becoming, you're going from a maiden to a mother, if you will, that fear of that transition. Um, and it is also it can, like, birth is such a transformative experience. It's such an empowering experience. And it can really, if you can give yourself to that, it can really transform you. It can empower you. It can change you. Um, so that you come out the other side and you truly are another person. Like it's almost like even if you go on a really like intense hike, if you will, and you're with a small pot of people and you go through this journey together through the trials and tribulations, you come out the other side and something has shifted, something has changed. Often it takes you to your limit and then some. And this is not just for birth. I mean, I think of birth as really a metaphor for life. And there's so many metaphors that I can pull in, like how stress and resilience shows up in the body. We're not going to be somebody else when we show up to labor. We come as ourselves and we bring our nervous system with us. And in life, we are often, pushing through. We are very productive. We have our narratives. We numb ourselves in certain ways, habitual ways. When you show up in labor, that kind of gets stripped aside. And what you have is your nervous system, the way that you cope. And if you've learned kind of to work with your nervous system, it's often a much easier or easeful, more graceful transition. The same as in perimenopause. So often if one some to muscling our way through or pushing through or being productive or doing, with birth, it's it's not necessarily about the preparation, but how we've worked with our nervous system. Are we comfortable with sensations? Are we comfortable with change? How are we with uncertainty with our lives? Because those things show up in labor and they show up in postpartum and they show up in perimenopause. So for example, in perimenopause, especially, I would say like the hardest part of labor is that very active part, that transition. The same as in perimenopause, it's like that late stage perimenopause when the hormones are like really quite chaotic, and it is a very, very chaotic time and it feels extremely overwhelming. But if you think about it as thinking about it as productivity or doing or muscling through or pushing through, it can sometimes bring up anxiety. If you can think about it as capacity and how to work with your nervous system through that change, then it can be empowering and we can kind of gracefully move through that
Yeah.
transition.
But
Is that
for sure, it's almost, you can't put on an act or put on a show, right? It's the most raw, authentic experience you have because it takes you past um pain levels. Since it's interesting, it's the way you frame it too, right? I think you can frame it as pain, or you could frame it as intensity, or you can frame it as whatever you'd like, but that's just the way that, I think your mindset will take you through that, or how you've prepared anyway for it. What do you
mm-hmm.
think
And
separates?
and also, Lauren, like this is not about epidural or no epidural. These things come up. It's just even the one's approach or relationship to possibly discomfort or feeling like we might be out of control, like how comfortable we are with losing that control. I think there's a big fear around that. Our body is going to be doing something that I can't control. That can bring up if someone might have be a little bit more comfortable around those things, that's a more easeful, you know, experience in that regards for
Mhm.
one experience. Yeah. So
Sure.
I think they come up in, both. This is not really, yes, that it's about the physiology, and also menopause is a physiological process too.
Yeah, sure. What do you think separates women who feel empowered during birth and those who feel overwhelmed? Like, what do you think it is?
Mm. So a lot has to do with, one, I think support is really important. Like the more supported someone feels during, not only during their pregnancy, but during the labor and the birth, it can be really helpful for them. But it comes, and knowing what kind of support you need. Um, and it has a lot to do, again, with the nervous system. So if one can kind of step into labor feeling grounded and anchored and have the capacity to move through the different sensations and changes that's happening and not necessarily fight it, but it's kind of a paradox. You can't muscle your way through it. I mean, sometimes you have to dig deep and you need the stamina for sure, but sometimes a lot of it is being able to surrender to it and go with it. And if we fight it, that can become very overwhelming. Or if we try to control it, that can become very overwhelming. So again, if our nervous system is feeling like in defense, it is more likely to shut down or collapse or dissolve into ourselves, or we may become defensive or panic. But if we can kind of support our nervous system to feel calm enough that we can maybe be energized, anchored enough that we're energized, that to be able to move, to be able to go with it, um, that would be less overwhelming for someone. And so it's about really understanding, where does the nervous system go? And of course, when you step into labor, that's an uncertain environment. And that can bring up defensive strategies. And how have we coped in other times in our lives? What's our default? Um, so can you repeat that question and I'll try
No, no,
to.
I think it was a great start and overview. I think for me, it was my body created a baby and I had no idea how to consciously do it, right? But subconsciously and otherwise, my body knew exactly what to do, right? And
Mhm,
so I think the mindset I went into with going into labor was I already know what to do, right? Subconsciously or otherwise. And so I took the position of, well, I'm going to be open to it. It's going to be intense, but I'm ready for it, right? And
mhm,
and I know, like, we've been doing this for thousands of years, right? Like, I know what to do. So I just
mhm.
need to let go and relax. And so what mindset do you think actually helps women move through birth? So not just physically, but mentally. Does it have anything to do with those pieces, or what do you
Exactly,
think?
exactly your mindset. Exactly your mindset. I mean, I wish for everyone to feel safe enough to have that mindset. And it's really about how safe one feels in the body, in that environment, and with the people that are around them. However, that's not always the case because not everybody steps into their labor feeling the way you just expressed, where you are
Mhm,
holding. Um, they can come with a lot of fear. Um, and, you know, where that comes from, it doesn't have to matter so much, kind of like the backstory, but just understanding that fear, tension kind of, the body keeps the score and it's not just a book title. It's really held in the tissues and in the fascia. And if we're feeling that high panic or fear, the body is going to hold itself. It's going to resist. We're going to fight it. And so either developing those tools ahead of time to manage that fear, the stress of labor, or, the experience that you'll go through, and try to be open into it. I mean, you said it so perfectly. I mean, the way that I like to see it, kind of physiologically is the baby has a lot of maneuvering that it has to do to go through the pelvis. Like the baby's doing the work, and the job of the mom really is to be able to relax and let go and kind of tune in to the baby's cues to be able to move or kind of drape the body in different positions to support the baby doing what it needs to do. Get out of the way. But that's often the challenge that I'm working with prenatally, preparing my clients' body and mind leading up to the birth.
Well, Chantal, you've talked quite a lot about mind, but that fear and the whole safety, how does that show up in the actual body during labor?
Yeah, so it's really, feeling safe really sets up the conditions for that positive birth experience on many levels, for a less traumatic birth experience or a less disappointing birth experience. It's like, how safe does one actually feel? And it's not so much like, yes, a hospital is a safe place. It's not that it's putting yourself in something it's about feeling safe. So it's the feeling safe. And what does that mean for each and every individual person? And so, you know, Dr. Stephen Porges came up with coined this word neuroception. Like our nervous system is constantly scanning the environment, kind of picking up on cues of threat or cues of safety, letting us know, is it safe or is the environment threatening? So there are three streams, if you will, of neuroception. This happens below the consciousness. We are scanning the environment. We're also scanning internally in our bodies. Do these sensations, like, do we recognize them that this may be uncomfortable, but it has a purpose? So I'm going to relax and let go, kind of how Lauren explained her experience. Or this discomfort, these sensations in my body, is this scary? Is this fearful? Is something wrong? And then we are picking up cues, say in the room, in the labor environment between us and other people. So we're constantly scanning along those three kind of streams of neuroception. And sometimes there's something like a faulty neuroception. So if we come in and we are already feeling panicked or in fear, we may misread cues. Like you could be in the room and I look at you and think, oh, he's angry with me. Did I do something wrong? But you could just be like, I've never been at a birth before. This looks scary. And so my neuroception might be picking up
I
cues.
remember that. I do remember
Being
that.
at a birth.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember being terrified about what
Mm.
was going on, and I had no idea what was going on. And it'd be interesting because obviously, well, let's just jump in and ask this question. So your role as a doula, when you see that happening, so whether it's the partner, whether it's the actual person, what do you do to help them regulate at that moment?
Yeah. So I think of as a doula as like a super co-regulator. As doulas or providers or practitioners, like the helpers in the room, if you will. And this could be a nurse, ideally the nurse, the midwife, or the OB. Ideally, they are regulated people themselves. So ideally, I am anchored and grounded when I step in to support my client, whether at the home, in the hospital, or in a coaching session, right? And then I'm offering regulating cues of energy to my clients, right? So I'm offering them my capacity, my resources of regulating energy to them that they can draw from. I'm also often reframing. So I'm often noticing these kind of miscommunications that are happening. For example, I once had a client who, okay, she was in labor and there were two people that came into the room. One was like a younger nurse and she was a little chatty and she was chatting to my client. And then there was like another more older nurse who was just like kind of in the background. She was setting up the room for delivery. And so at one point my client was like, okay, that nurse is like kind of killing my vibe. She's got to go. But I understood the situation. And so when that nurse, the older nurse, was like stepping out of the room, I said, I'm just going to go get you some ice chips quickly. So I stepped out with her and I said, you know, how about just coming in and introducing yourself? Like I can, like you're amazing. I can see that you're trying to be unobtrusive and just setting up, but I think it would be helpful for my client if you just, introduce yourself and say hi, have a little chit chat and
Yeah.
say what you're doing. And she was like, sure, no problem. I was really trying to just give her space. And, and, and so she did. She came up to my client and she said, you know what? I'm actually just training this younger nurse who's just started. I'm setting up the room. I'm making sure like everything is in the right place. I don't want to bother you. You're in your zone and you're laboring, but if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. And then she went about her business, and it kind of shifted the energy because then my client was like, oh, that nurse is amazing. It just changed it. And so
Yeah.
what happens is our nervous system in that moment is going to shape the story we tell ourselves. So if we're in a dysregulated state and we misinterpret the cues of somebody else, we make up a story about it. And then that story just gets bigger and bigger. And there's this big rupture that happens. Because she was anxious and the person was just chitty chatty with her, she thought that might have been better support. She was lovely, but she was inexperienced. And so she then understood the situation and she had the support of both of them in the end. But
Yeah.
these kind of, or for example, this happens often. I had a client that gave birth and she just gave birth and she was like, okay, I need this and I need this and I need this. And I heard the nurse step out and like talk to the other person because we were right by the nurse's station. And she was like, oh my God, that patient is so difficult. And I kind of stepped out and not right then, but after I went out and I was like, excuse me, I just want to reframe. This person just went through something huge. She just gave birth to someone. I know you see this all day and every day, but this is a unique experience. So if she needs something like a warm bath, I'm happy to go and get it for her, but just kind of remember that she's going through it for the first time. And once we settle her and she feels safe, then that neediness or needing more will shift, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I feel like I'm putting out fires just a little bit so that because I want the whole team to be cohesive. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it might be, like if the dad is really nervous and he's just kind of like sitting on that chair wide at the far end of the room, I might suggest, hey, should I pull up the chair like closer to the bed and you can kind of sit here and offer emotional support like right here? Because where you place yourself in the room can have an impact.
Yeah.
And then lastly, just in terms of like labor, of course, if someone's feeling like they're panicking or they feel like it's too much and they're beginning to hyperventilate, I ground them with breath, with movement. If I see someone getting really stuck, going into that dorsal vagal collapse, I might say, okay, let's go for a walk. We're going to walk together to the bathroom, maybe. Let's go to the bathroom. I haven't gone to the bathroom for a while. And I'll help her up and we'll like walk together. So we get that rhythm, that movement, that breath, that co-regulation of walking together, and maybe go to the bathroom where it's like quiet, right? Dark and quiet, and you can sit and breathe and have some time and relax, because we used to relaxing and letting go maybe when we go to the bathroom. So I will use different strategies, but I'm thinking about it from a nervous system point of view. I might not say, okay, get up and go to the bathroom. I'm going to say, come, let's go together. And we walk together. It's kind of like when you've had a hard day and you call up a buddy and say, let's go for a run together. Like when we move together, we have that co-regulation.
Yeah. So specifically in active labor,
Mm-hmm.
are there patterns that you see over and over again that, as to how women respond to under that level of intensity? Are there just certain patterns that are
Mm-hmm.
kind of tried and true across the board?
Yeah. Like that very active labor, that transition. Yes, in many different cases, again, not only in birth, but we'll use birth as a metaphor, because even if you've never given birth or planning to give birth, this shows up like in perimenopause. That very transition, think about late stage perimenopause, when things are so intense, and maybe you see this in fitness, that's when most women will say, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I'm give up, like I'm done. And it's right at the end. And it's almost that moment. If you can support that person, to go a little bit further, to go past that point together, not alone, like you're supporting them. That is where that kind of, I don't want to say the transformation is, but there's something that happens that's so empowering because they're able to get to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
Yeah.
people want to give up right at that moment where it's really like the last lap. It's that a contraction or two and we start pushing.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like right towards the end is when most people are like, okay, I can't anymore. I need the epidural. Now, obviously in a hospital, like I would never deny anyone pain, but I'm going to invite them to kind of maybe get checked to see where they are so that they realize like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm fully dilated. What I really need to do now is push. To, let them know that this is the last lap. This is the end. You're right at that point. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's very common for people to say, I'm done. I can't, I need a C-section. I just get this baby out. And it's kind of enduring because there's a breaking point. It's kind of like, I like to think of it in this way, and not entirely in this way, but how you make olive oil? Is you have to crush
Mm-hmm.
crush the olives. You have to there's like a break in, there's something has to happen. Or grape juice, you have to crush the grapes to get the juice. There's a moment where it's almost like you're right at the end of your breaking point and then something happens. There's an emergence and you can go much further, and I think it happens in parenting. I think it happens, certainly in menopause as well. And there's
So
a
so
shift.
so why do some people shut down under stress while others could just move through it?
Yeah. So I think our nervous system might have learned early on in life that to keep us safe, um, shutting down, disassociating, or collapsing actually kept them safe in that moment. So just in terms of understanding the nervous system, it has these different pathways. And if you think about the autonomic nervous system, think about it that it's an automatic. It's automatic. There's a hierarchy that we go through that it's like it's out of so we regulate it, we calm, we energize, and then there's a threat. Okay, can I give you an example maybe to paint a picture?
Please.
Maybe we've heard it before or not, but so for example, if anybody has like a cat in their house, there might be a mouse like running around like in the kitchen or something, and it senses the cat who's now chasing it, and it's running running away. So basically our nervous system under some sort of threat, it might just kind of freeze in an activated freeze, like deer in the headlights, or it's going to try and fight its way out of a situation. Think of getting defensive or arguing. Obviously, a small mouse can't fight with a cat, so it's going to run. So it's going to get into sympathetic, activate, and mobilize. If we can't fight our way out of a situation or talk our way out of a situation, and we can't flee, there's nowhere to go, say in a labor room, for example, can't run away, then we go further down that hierarchy into what we call like a dorsal vagal collapse. We might disassociate, we might shut down. So what they would look like for the mouse now being caught by the cat, the mouse in the jaws of the cat goes limp. It looks dead. We're like, oh my gosh, did that cat just kill that mouse? Usually in survival, the predator doesn't like their prey to be dead. It loses interest. So it will put that mouse down and maybe go look for another mouse. The mouse waits, senses some safety, it shakes itself, and then it runs off. Kind of like out in the savannah when a big lion runs after impala, the impala is not going to necessarily try to fight the lion. Maybe an elephant would, but so it's going to run. It's going to try to flee. If it can't run out of it and the big lion has actually got it in its jaws, it goes limp. It plays dead. It's just, this is what happens to the nervous system. It shuts down. The lion will lose interest, hopefully, put the impala down and maybe look for something else. The impala will sense some safety and then it will shake. It has to mobilize itself. It can't go back to just grazing the grass. It needs to get a little sympathetic. It needs to shake. And then it just gets up and it joins its herd or starts grazing. So our nervous system is always going through these different pathways. We go from calm and regulated, that parasympathetic, that's sleeping well, that's digesting, socializing. If we feel threatened, we go into one layer of survival, sympathetic. If we can't fight or flee our way out of it, we go further down into collapse. And these pathways, we have these old familiar pathways that we kind of have a tendency to go to in ourselves. We kind of know, like when we get triggered, where do we go? When you get triggered, where do you go?
Yeah, so obviously you work with women from birth through menopause. So just taking what you've just said there, is there a common thread across these transitions?
Yeah.
Are lots of women, I'm just going to call it, I can't remember the term, but basically, are they collapsing a lot under the stress, both in birth, both in menopause?
We have our predefined pathways that get kind of worn well through life. Like we have those old pathways. It's like when you go on a hike and you go the same path, right? It becomes very well worn. And then one day you might decide I'm going to go a different way. And then you continue that pathway, and you might not even remember where the old pathway is, but you might see it kind of like with overgrown weeds. There's that old pathway. We have these pathways. So if I get triggered, for example, I go into I get hypervigilant, for example, or I tend to work a lot or something. That's my thing. I'm kind of like do too much, or I get more sympathetic. And if I go too far, like if I've worked and I've taken on too much and take on, and I don't give myself enough rests in the day, you're going to find me collapse on the couch at the end of the day, like, I was going to say like a slug, but poor slug, I can't even get up and make dinner for my kids. I've pushed myself too far and I've completely collapsed. Ideally, I put that break on throughout the day. So at the end of like my working and coaching with clients, doing, talks and presentations and writing, I then give myself time, that there's enough time I've taken care of myself that I'm like, can make dinner talk to my kids, make dinner with my kids and my husband. And, I've paced myself, but that usually is my go-to. Now, some people might go straight to collapse. That's their kind of predetermined habitual pathway. And so, yes, if that's your pathway, that might be what shows up postpartum or perimenopause. But we all have these, we all go through it. We go very fast down those old pathways. Like they super fast. You might get a trigger, someone looks at you the wrong way and then you get defensive, or your defense, would it be to get defensive and argue, or would it be defensive and shut down? So we have these different pathways that we go down, and we tend to favor the same pathways until we become aware of it and we can learn new pathways. Now, I will say that we have like hybrid pathways. So it's not like you need to be regulated and sympathetic and, and collapse is like necessarily bad. Let me explain to you for in birth. Ideally, we come in with a hybrid of an anchor of regulated energy with a regulated, calm, peaceful, with enough energized for labor. So we have a little bit of sympathetic so that we can move and breathe and get through our labor. And then as we get closer to second stage, that parasympathetic dorsal with cues of safety looks like second stage of labor, that looks like intimacy, nursing, relations, right? It's not all bad. It's just, is it in a container of threat or is it in a container of safety? That sympathetic, that energy can look like play, it can look like dance, it can look like going for a run. If we have enough of a anchor of regulation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I want to go back for a second. So
yeah,
you mentioned there's habitual paths to the nervous system, right? And we continue to do maybe the same things over and over, have the same responses over and over. So how does the nervous system then evolve? Or if it doesn't evolve, how does it get impacted over time? So what are the ways we could get out, or what are the negatives, I suppose, if we don't?
Well, when we live in constant defense, for example, in defensive strategies, that is very pro-inflammatory, for example. And that leads to dis-ease in many levels. It means like not sleeping, gut issues, all the things, and brain fog, all the things when we're in defense. Because so our nervous system really is designed to keep us safe. And when it's working well, right, we use social behavior to manage in a way that allows us to have like growth and healing and sleeping. But if things get really bad, and sometimes we use that word trauma, right? When that stress, that trauma isn't quickly resolved, then we go into those much more older primitive pathways, those coping mechanisms. And they're not designed for growth, for restoration, for healing, and sleeping, right? They're designed to deal with acute stress, acute trauma in the moment. But when those traumas keep going, they begin to erode the body. And that's pro-inflammatory. So when we live in hypervigilance or pushing, so for a lot of my clients, they're used to like high productivity, go, go, go. And you can somehow, for example, get away with it like in your 30s and maybe early 40s. But when you're constantly pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and then you start to lose the buffering of the hormones, right? Because we're learning to live with much less. When that buffering goes away, then we don't really have that support of our nervous. We don't have that support, and so then our nervous system is kind of pretty much on its own without the support, and so those things show up. We have these like maladaptive ideas. So we have to think about like, how do we generally cope with stress? Do we doom
So
scroll?
Chantal, let's
Yeah.
you started moving us away from childbirth,
Sorry.
which is
Oh,
great.
okay.
No, that's great.
Sorry.
No, this is great. So, how is perimenopause similar to childbirth in terms of that sort of intensity, that unpredictability that you've just been talking about?
Okay, so birth, postpartum, perimenopause, they are big kind of hormonal transitions as well. So hormones are definitely involved, as well as if we were going through big changes in our lives. How do we handle uncertainty? There are big identity shifts that are happening. So postpartum and perimenopause have a lot of similarities, is that there is almost like a loss of ourself as we become something new. We kind of think of it like a butterfly emerging out of a cocoon. There is this kind of, we are now shifting into something new. So we have a loss of identity as we know ourselves before, and this is something new. So there can be real grief with that. Like when we are losing basically we're moving out of our childbearing years, that potential for childbirth, even if we've chosen never to have it, we're losing that. And so it can feel in a way with the loss of, like, say, progesterone and estrogen and testosterone, but we don't have the support of the buffering of our hormones, that things become more sensitive. It feels like things are breaking down in the body. But what's really happening, and it really can feel, because, there is that musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause, like we're losing that estrogen, that support for our bones and our muscles. But if we can learn to embrace it, it is more of a recalibration. And in a way, it's a recalibration because this is a time in postpartum, but also in perimenopause specifically, as we move into menopause, is that our priorities really begin to shift. We can't keep doing the same old thing that we were doing in our 20s and our 30s and our early 40s. It doesn't work anymore. We can't exercise the way that we're necessarily exercising without rethinking about our approach. We can't maybe work at the intensity. We have to start thinking about our capacity. And so we look at our priorities, and there's a shift that happens if we honor it, and there's a shift of priorities. So maybe we're letting go of things that don't serve us anymore. If we never set boundaries in our youth, in our 20s, and our 30s, it's going to show up in perimenopause, menopause, where it's going to ask us to learn how to set boundaries, because we have to think of our energy as how much capacity that we have. So we have to prioritize. So if we've never so basically those vulnerabilities that we were able to mask and kind of push through, because we don't have the buffering of the hormones anymore, they show up and asking
Okay.
us to change. If we
Okay.
refuse to change, if we refuse to embrace this and listen to our body, because our body is not failing us. It's giving us clues. It's speaking to us. It's communicating with us. If we continue on like we were, for example, like say going 120% of max with every workout that we did and not incorporating rest or restorative practices, we're going to start injuring ourselves in perimenopause, menopause.
So Chantal, we've introduced this new thing called rapid fire. So
Oh,
I and Lauren are gonna ask you a bunch of questions, and 10 seconds or less to
okay.
answer these different questions. So, 3 reasons in 10 seconds or less why so many women feel blindsided by this stage of perimenopause.
Yes, because it's a little better now, but we were not talking about it. No one was really aware of it. So usually when they get to know, like, oh, they're already in the thick of it. So there wasn't the education. Our medical providers haven't learned about it. Women at the stage of life are often thrown the ageism card. Things are missed and dismissed. And they are told that something's wrong with them, or they're being hypersensitive, or they're being difficult, and to just carry on like they were. And this is a huge shift. And when the providers, that we're going out to, can actually recognize what is actually happening in the body from a
So
physiological standpoint.
you're
My
taking
frame,
30 seconds and not 10, but it's okay. It's, so
sorry.
no problem. So it's education, it's being aware, etcetera. Okay, Lauren, go.
Education and support, and the resources.
Yeah.
Got it. How do symptoms like anxiety, sleep issues, and brain fog tie back to the nervous system?
Yeah. So when you think about anxiety, um, and not to poo-poo it, I mean, it's real. It's very real. I have lots of clients, and I also tend to run on anxious, so I understand it. But when we are dysregulated or upregulated, we become anxious. So when we become really overwhelmed with what's in front of us, like we're living in the future, we're living in the past, we can become really anxious. And when we can support our nervous system to come back to feeling anchored, and centered, and think more of like our capacity, then we can support, like, for example, vigilance often comes up in postpartum and in perimenopause. And there's usually often a backstory to it. However, it's very hard to get deep restorative sleep with one eye open, for example. And we don't have our hormones kind of like supporting us. So we have to learn what we need to feel safe enough to be able to let go and fall asleep. Very similar to birth. What do we need to feel safe enough to let go and let our body open? And the same with brain fog, it's inflammation. So that chronic stress, we have to learn how to manage and mitigate our stresses, our chronic stresses, to put that break on, throughout the day, throughout our week, throughout our month, throughout our year, so that we have the capacity to heal, because you can't supplement your way out of a dysregulated nervous system. You can't heal in a dysregulated nervous system. You can't get deep sleep in a dysregulated nervous system. We have to be able to learn how to expand our time in regulation. We're not there all the time. I'm not saying you have to be calm and centered out throughout the whole day, but how do we come back and then expand our time uh, in a more of a regulated, calm um, state, nervous system state? Does that, did I manage with the 10 seconds?
It's okay.
What are we misunderstanding when we, not saying we do, but what are we misunderstanding if we blamed everything solely on hormones?
It's a very male thing. It's a very male thing to say that to a woman in that perimenopause or menopause. It's
Well,
just
no, I
your,
don't
Yeah.
mean
it's just your hormones. No, but I know
I
from,
mean, I
I've
think,
seen that.
yeah, I don't want to. So let's say this. I think women do too, because I'll get a lot of clients and they want to test the hormones,
yeah.
and there is value in testing, but it's sometimes just a snapshot, because in time, because our hormones are fluctuating so much, especially towards late perimenopause. It's really, what we're missing is, where is our nervous system at? How are we living? Are we in constant upregulation? Are we in constant chronic stress? Are we in constant overwhelm? How much support do we have? Um, and then I think when we're going through some of these big transitions too, these big hormonal transitions, is like, how can we even just have the self-compassion, right, to allow these changes to happen? There's a change that's happening. And it's not so much as fighting it and keeping it the same as it was before, but how do we understand? Because really, late perimenopause, that it's almost like we are learning. It's kind of going into what's it called when you if you're getting over drugs, when you kind of, what's the word?
Oh, withdrawal?
Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
withdrawal. It's like what you're feeling as intense as withdrawal symptoms. We are learning how to live with much less estrogen, much less progesterone, and much less testosterone. This has nothing to do with, are you going to choose to have hormone therapy or not? It's not like you can just slap on a patch and it's a panacea for everything. We still have to support all the systems as well. And it's a process.
Yeah.
And I always start with the nervous system, of course. And
So
you can
that would be so if somebody's disconnected from the body, whether in postpartum or midlife, they start with the nervous system. So if
well, let's
that's the
take it a
case,
little bit. Let's take it a little bit even more simpler. Let's start with the breath. You
yeah,
take a breath
okay.
and take a long, slow exhale.
And then, okay, so after everything you've seen, whether birth rooms or menopause, what is one thing you wish every woman understood about her body? Just one.
That their body was actually their friend. Can I say something? So many women with both postpartum perimenopause feel that their body has failed them, feel that their body has given up on them. If we can listen to our body, if we can listen to the cues, if we can listen to those little symptoms when they're whispers, not when it's shouting at us, we can learn to work together with our body and our nervous system. So I would say that our body is trying to protect us. That's its job. It just wants to protect us. And so if we listen to it, we can work together with our body.
That's such great advice.
It is.
That is really, really good advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in all chapters of life, men and women,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, this totally translate, I think, to men as well, because we also go through hormonal changes. It's just a little bit different at different stages of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Very much so. Very much. So no, I like that. Just learning to
Yeah.
understand this is your body protecting you. That's
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that soundbite. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Chantal, thank you so much for coming on to the episode today. We always like to close with one final and same question across the board, and that is in relation to our core values of this podcast. So strength, kindness, and perspective are kind of our pillars.
Mhm.
Is there someone in your life who embodies these values, someone who has deeply influenced or inspired your journey that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah. I'm gonna say Stephen Porges, who created polyvagal theory. And I'm lucky enough to call him a friend. He embodies polyvagal theory. In strength, I mean, he came up with a new reframe about the nervous system at a time that no one was thinking about it in this way. Um, so he was very brave in, putting his theory out into the world. Um, Kindness. I and this is for everyone, not just for me. When he is talking to you, he is so curious and so compassionate about the nervous system in you. Like you feel seen, you feel validated. Like he really epitomizes like polyvagal theory, I think.